Okay, let's do this. So today I want to talk about something very important because it is Memorial Day weekend. So what I would like to share with all of you is what I might call a Memorial Day message to all Americans, because this is something that I think pertains to all of us. And I'm going to explain why in just a moment. Now, I thought about whether or not I should share this message on Monday, since Monday is Memorial Day, or whether I should go ahead and do it now. Today is Saturday. And I thought, well, originally I was going to do it on Monday, but I decided to go ahead and do it because I think a lot of people are already in the frame of mind of Memorial Day because a lot of times Memorial Day tends to be seen more as Memorial Day weekend than just Memorial Day. So some people are already in that frame of mind, which is a good thing. So I figured I would go ahead and do this video and share this message. So for those who are actually thinking about Memorial Day, that's a good thing. However, I do think that we should focus on what is it that people are thinking when they think about Memorial Day, and what should we think about when we think about Memorial Day? Because I think those are important questions, and those are important questions for all Americans, regardless of what your affiliation is or has ever been to the military. Now, May. May is Military Appreciation Month. In fact, a week ago, I put out a video on Armed Forces Day. You also have Armed Forces Week in May. So there's a lot to do to kind of celebrate the military in May, which I think is great. But Memorial Day is different than Armed Forces Day, and it's different than Veterans Day. So all three of those days are distinct. So again, very succinctly stated. So, and I went over this very briefly in the video that I did a week ago on Armed Forces Day, but just to rehash, because this is important and a lot of people get confused, which is to some degree understandable because it can be confusing. Armed Forces Day is a day of celebration for those who currently wear the uniform, those who are currently serving in the armed forces. Veterans Day is for those who have served. Memorial Day is specifically to honor the fallen. It is specifically to honor those who have given the ultimate sacrifice. So there's a little bit of a different spirit when it comes to Memorial Day. So Armed Forces Day, Veterans Day, even Armed Forces Week. So those are days that can be seen in a happy, uplifting way. They can be celebrated. I don't know that celebrate is the right word for Memorial Day. On Memorial Day, we memorialize, we commemorate, we remember. Now, all those words I just used are related to the word memory. Well, what exactly do we mean? What about what memory, or what are we remembering? Well, we're remembering the following. Why are we remembering them? We're remembering them because they're no longer here. So maybe that'll help you just kind of understand and keep straight in your mind what Memorial Day is and why it is a little bit different than Armed Forces Day or Veterans Day. Those are happy days. You can wish someone happy Armed Forces Day. You can wish someone happy Veterans Day. Is it inappropriate to wish someone happy Memorial Day? Yeah, it's a little bit inappropriate. And I'll explain the reason why in just a moment. And you will even have sometimes service members who may even express offense at being wished Memorial Day. And you may think that they're taking that a little bit too far. And okay, sure, fair enough. But why would they even express offense? Here's why. Memorial Day is not about those who are currently serving. It's not about those that are, for lack of a better way to explain it, those that are still here. It is specifically a day to remember the fallen, honor the memory of those that are no longer with us, those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice. That's why it's a day of remembrance. We are remembering them, we're honoring their sacrifice. So it's not, there's a little bit more of a, it's a more solemn day. And so maybe that's why we wouldn't necessarily say it's a day of celebration per se. It's more we honor the day, or a day, maybe of commemoration, but not necessarily celebration. So it's important that we note that distinction. Now, does that mean that we should be in mourning over all of Memorial Day weekend? No, no, not necessarily. Of course, there is a way to be thankful, to be gracious in our remembrance of those who have fallen, and still honor the day, and still maintain the appropriate sanctity for the day. I think there's a way to do that. So when exactly did Memorial Day become a holiday? It actually began after the Civil War, and it began as a way to honor Union soldiers who had died during the war. It was originally called Decoration Day. Well, why Decoration Day? Because the way in which the memory of those Union soldiers was honored is that people would place decorations such as wreaths or whatever on their grave sites. And over time, that began to expand in its application, particularly after World War I. And then, 100 years later, 100 years after it first began to be kind of recognized as this day, where people started doing it to honor the Union dead right after the war. About 100 years later, it began to take on the name Memorial Day and began to be recognized on the last Monday in May, and it was recognized as an official holiday in 1971. And so now, again, it expanded over that 100-year period. Obviously, between the late 1860s and then 1971, you had not just World War I and World War II, but you also had the Korean War. You had, a good portion of the Vietnam War had happened by then. So the day had expanded in its application and had become over time a day in which you could honor all those who have fallen in combat throughout American history, which is kind of the way that we look at Memorial Day now. So it used to be called Decoration Day, now called Memorial Day. It used to apply to those who had fallen on the side of the Union during the Civil War, but now it is much more expanded in its application. So, what is our role as citizens with respect to Memorial Day? So, we should remember and honor the fallen. But what exactly does that mean? So, in a very simple way, we could say, well, could we go visit a military cemetery? Sure. And perhaps even maybe we have people that are close to us, whether they are family members or good friends that unfortunately were lost in battle, or maybe even or maybe even an ancestor. You could go honor an ancestor that you never even knew because they had perished long before you were born, and you could still go honor their sacrifice. Maybe somebody who died in World War I. So all of that are, of course, are ways in which you can remember the sacrifice of the fallen and certainly maintain the sanctity of the day. There may be other events in your community that you could participate in that also honor the fallen in a way that appropriately maintains the solemn attitude commensurate with the meaning of the day. But in a more general way, how should we approach this day? Well, I think for us to tackle this, we got to be able to think in a little bit of complexity here. We have to appreciate the nuance involved, and we have to parse through some ideas that perhaps on the surface may appear to be intention, but maybe they're not necessarily intention once you scratch beneath the surface. And in doing that, the first point we should address here is understanding very clearly there is a difference between the soldier, and I'm using that term soldier generically. I mean, I realize we have troops in various branches. We have soldiers, we have Marines, airmen. I got it. I'm using soldier generically. Bear with me. There's a difference between the soldier and the policymaker. So first and foremost, we must understand that. My last video on Armed Forces Day, I spoke about the idea of citizenry and what that means as an aspect of serving as a soldier in the military. This idea of living in a republic and then what that means to serve in the armed forces in a republic. Okay, so think about that with respect to the troops, the service members, the soldiers. Now think about the policymakers, particularly nowadays where we know that often policies are implemented by individuals that are either out for their own gain or they implement policies to achieve ends that have nothing to do with the interests of the United States, securing our rights, preserving our freedoms, or other interests of the United States citizens. As an example of this, think about if you've heard this quotation, perhaps you haven't, but there is a quotation that is attributed to Henry Kissinger. Okay. And supposedly he said, military men are just dumb, stupid animals to be used as pawns in foreign policy. All right, I'm going to say that again. So Henry Kissinger supposedly once said, quote, military men are just dumb, stupid animals to be used as pawns in foreign policy, unquote. Now, that supposed quotation comes from a book um, that was written by Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein called The Final Days. And I don't know that Kissinger has ever refuted the claims that he made that quotation. There are other people that say, hey, it's not exactly sure that he made that quotation, but it is often attributed to him. Okay, so maybe he said it, maybe he didn't. Some speculate he didn't say it. Knowing what we know about Henry Kissinger, regardless of whether or not he ever uttered those exact words at the time in which the authors of this book, The Final Days, supposedly say that he said it, um, I don't think it's too far afield from the ideas that Henry Kissinger held in his head and plenty of other policymakers. So I do believe that that quotation, whether it is 100% accurate in terms of having been said by Henry Kissinger at the time that the authors of this book claim he said it, I do believe that it is a fairly accurate representation of many people in DC who are policymakers. And here's the other thing: the people above the policymakers in DC, the people who control what those in government actually do, the people that those in government are actually beholden to, it's absolutely what they think about U.S. service members and service members around the globe from other countries. But today we're talking about Memorial Day here in the United States. So we must understand there is a difference between the soldier and the policymaker. So there's a difference between the soldier that goes to war and the policymaker that sends the soldier to war. There's a clear difference there. Now, are all wars at all times bad and unjustified? I'm not saying that. I think many are unjustified. I think many are premised upon lies or narratives that don't accord with reality. But many is not all. I'm not one of these people who believes that war is never ever justified under any circumstances whatsoever. But I don't necessarily want to get into that. I mean, there's a whole discussion that could be held on just war. I'm not necessarily trying to get into that. That's its own discussion. I just want you to understand that I don't think that 100% of wars are bad or unjustified. I do believe that many are. And I do believe that war should always be a last resort. Violence should always be a last resort, whether it's in a personal situation or whether it's in a collective situation for a group of people, to include a nation. But I do believe sometimes it is the only answer, and sometimes it is necessary. And I say this as someone who's served a long time in the military. Sometimes it comes to it, and sometimes we'll just leave it at that. I do believe sometimes it is necessary. But for all the wars that aren't necessary or that are premised upon lies, here's the thing: good men still die in bad wars. Good men still die in bad wars. Well, what's a bad war? By bad war, I could mean one that's stupid, one that's unwinnable, but more importantly, or those that are unjustified, those that are perhaps um, built upon narratives that aren't true or whatever, but just unjustified. So many of you are probably familiar with, because I'm going to use an example here that many of you are probably familiar with. So if you've ever watched the movie Saving Private Ryan, and many of you probably have, um, which I think is a great movie. It's a great movie. I saw it when I was at West Point, and when I say I saw it when I was at West Point, I mean I was literally at West Point when I saw it. I saw it in the West Point, movie theater. Not just that I was a cadet when I saw it, but I mean I was at West Point in uniform when I watched the movie. And we were, those of us who watched it, I mean, we were spellbound when we watched this movie, and I do think it's a great movie. Now, we could talk about whether or not there's a propaganda aspect of that movie. I think that's certainly the case with many, many movies. Um, sure, but let's set that aside. Let's set aside what we think about Tom Hanks and all the weird stuff that he, has supposedly been involved in. Let's set that aside. And even if you don't like the movie, maybe you think it's not that great of a movie. Okay, cool. Let's just set that aside. So, and if you haven't seen the movie, I think you should see it. So no spoilers here, though. I mean, the movie's like, I don't even know, 25 years old, 26 years old. So if you haven't seen it, it's literally been out for over a quarter of a century. But maybe I don't have to give any spoilers though. But there is this very poignant scene at the end of a movie, at the end of the movie, in which there is this grand reflection over this admonition to earn this. Okay. So let's think about this. Okay. Let's think about that in the way that it would apply to all of us as Americans, looking back on the sacrifices of those who have given it all, in battle, in combat. Whether we look all the way back to the war for independence or subsequent wars. So what exactly does it mean to earn this? Or asked another way, are we in this generation, are we earning what has been given to us, perhaps even at great cost in blood over the generations, or even those who have perished relatively recently, maybe even in the last couple of years or 2 decades in the global war on terror, as opposed to, more previous wars. Are we living in a way to earn what has been given to us, perhaps at great cost in blood? Now, in order to kind of answer that or even approach that question, again, we got to take a nuanced look at this, because your response to me might be like, yeah, but a lot of times when military service members are fighting abroad on foreign soil, they're not fighting for my rights or my liberties. And I would agree with you. I would agree with you. But let's separate the soldier who goes to war from the policymaker who sends the soldier to war. But that doesn't mean that your response back to me is invalid. It's very valid. And it's at the heart of what I want to talk about today. So we should earn the good that has been purchased in blood, but we should condemn those who have wrongly, for unjust reasons, sent good young men and women to die on foreign soil wearing U.S. military uniforms. And we can do both of those at the same time. Those don't have to be competing ideas. Okay, I'm gonna repeat that. Are we as Americans earning the good things that have come to us from our forefathers or those even more recently? What they have given to us at the cost of their lives? Are we earning that which we have been given? The good. And at the same time, are we condemning the erroneous, flawed, or otherwise awful, unjust reasons that good men and women have died throughout history on foreign soil for reasons that don't make sense, that don't measure up? The American war machine has been fueled on the blood of America's sons and daughters as much as it has been fueled on the blood of many other people from foreign lands, and not all of them were bad. And I'm not one of these extreme pacifists who believes that violence is never the answer. I already said that. I believe that it's rare that it's the answer. Should be a last resort. I already said that. So I'm not saying all the wars in America's history have been unjust. But I will say right here definitively, explicitly, that most of the wars in America's history have been unjust. So we can absolutely honor the sacrifices of the courageous men and women who died serving their country, our country, while still condemning in the strongest terms possible the flawed, mistaken, and often dishonest policies that put them into harm's way. To do so, in fact, is one of the best ways to honor their memory. This doesn't in any way mean that they died in vain. In fact, I would say this ensures that they didn't die in vain. Many of them fought to secure our rights or preserve our liberties. And even where they didn't, they may have believed that that's what they were doing. And in some cases, that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to serve their country. They wanted to fight to secure Americans' rights, preserve our liberties. And then in the midst of their service, wherever, they realized that that was not what they were doing. And many of them became disillusioned over time. And some of them, despite that disillusionment, tried to continue in their duty. And some of them even died. I mean, this is tough stuff. This is stuff that we as Americans have to wrestle with. There are no easy answers here, but we have to grapple with these issues. We've got to be able to think in complexity. We got to understand where we have to take a nuanced approach. We've got to part through some of these ideas and realize that, hey, I can honor their sacrifice while also condemning the flawed reasons, the flawed policies, the dishonest policies, the lies that often sent these young men and women to die, with or without their understanding. When our government, to include the Department of Defense, engages in lies or uses our troops to fuel a runaway war machine, or when the government and the Department of Defense turn against their own service members, deprive their rights, lie to them, and by extension, turn against the citizens of the country broadly, as happened over the last couple of years, as I've spoken about many, many times, then the government, to include the Department of Defense, dishonors the memory of the fallen. They desecrate when they engage in those actions. Those individuals, the individuals in government, the individuals in the senior positions of the Department of Defense, whether they do or do not wear a military uniform, when they engage in those activities, they desecrate the very uniform that fallen service members wore when they gave the ultimate sacrifice. As citizens of this country, let us not be a party to the desecration of the sacrifice of those courageous men and women who gave their lives. Let us not participate in the desecration of their memory. Let's honor their memory by holding fast to what makes us Americans. Let's refuse to permit that bloodthirsty old men in business suits send young men and women to foreign lands in military uniforms for reasons that have nothing to do with American interests, securing our rights, preserving our liberties. So, in summation, by all means, enjoy your weekend, but as you do, remember those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice. Let us all honor their memory by cherishing the good that makes America America and makes us Americans. But at the same time, let's reject that which is currently destroying our country and destroying that which makes us Americans. And let's refuse to participate in any activities that tarnish the memory of fallen service members or that in any way cheapens their sacrifice. As citizens in a republic, we have this responsibility. We can honor the sacrifice of the fallen. We can remember them. We can do so with the appropriate sanctity and still condemn those who sent them into harm's way for reasons that had nothing to do with what we as Americans consider to be reasons that warrant going to war. In fact, we have a duty and a moral obligation to do just that. That is one of the ways in which we can best uphold the memory of those who pay the ultimate sacrifice. Thank you.